Welcome to Alien Eve. New sci-fi stories arrive every 4 hours. If you want these journeys to continue, your support means everything. For long listening sessions, check out the playlist and enjoy the universe.
The throne hall of Talorian was built to intimidate, but Ambassador Callan Ward had seen enough alien courts to remain mostly unfazed. Mostly. Twin arcs of obsidian metal rose like frozen waves on either side of the chamber, etched with light-threaded runes that shifted with every breath of air. The vaulted ceiling shimmered with drifting motes that resembled captured starlight. A soft radiance illuminated everything except the far end of the hall, where the queen sat in deliberate shadow. Queen Erinya Valsarin did not rise when he entered. She didn't need to. Her species, elegance, was a thing whispered about even among humans, and seeing her in person made Callan understand why. The elongated ears, the sharp symmetry, the metallic sheen to her skin, the cold, nearly luminescent eyes, her presence felt sculpted rather than born. Beautiful, perhaps, in a way that seemed engineered for distance rather than affection. "Ambassador Ward," she said, her voice echoing as if the chamber itself leaned in to listen. "You came promptly. I serve at your convenience, your majesty." He bowed, controlled but not servile. He'd learned long ago that queens respected dignity more than trembling. Erinya regarded him for a long, unreadable moment. "I sent for you because I require an answer to a question that has eluded me." Callan lifted an eyebrow. "If it is political, I will do my best." "It is not political." Her gaze sharpened. "It is personal." That surprised him. Personal questions were rare from a monarch known for her flawless restraint. He watched as she slowly rose from the darkened throne, the shadows peeling away from her like fading tides. She descended the steps without ceremony, stopping just a few meters away from him. "You study cultures," she said. "You observe species, their values, their aesthetic philosophies. You've cataloged hundreds of definitions of beauty." She stepped closer. "So tell me, human, when your species speaks of beauty, could someone like me ever qualify?" Callan blinked. "That's a profound question for 2 in the morning. I didn't ask for humor." Her tone carried the faintest tremor. "I asked for truth." She circled him once, slow and assessing, but not predatory. More like someone bracing for something they've waited centuries to hear. He kept his eyes forward, giving her dignity. "You're respected across a dozen worlds," she said quietly. "Feared by some, revered by others, but beautiful, that word has never been offered to me. I find I wish to understand why." Callan realized something then. This wasn't arrogance. It was an old wound worn into flawless armor. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "beauty isn't universal." "Then explain it." She stepped in front of him, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "Explain what humans see when they look at someone like me." He exhaled. "Humans don't define beauty by symmetry alone, or power, or presence. Those things inspire awe, but awe is not beauty. Beauty requires vulnerability, humanity, even if not human." Her expression flickered, pain or hope, he couldn't tell. "That is not an answer," she said. "That is a deflection." "Because I can't answer honestly without knowing you." Callan closed his journal. "Not the queen, not the legend, you." Erinya stiffened, every instinct telling her to retreat behind command and distance. But she didn't. She held his gaze instead, a storm of centuries tightening behind her eyes. "What would you require?" she whispered. 3 days, Callan said. "No throne, no ceremony, no audience. Just your life as you live it when you think no one is watching. Let me see how you rule, how you rest, how you break, how you hope." Her breath caught. "You believe my answer lies in the unseen." "I believe beauty does." A long silence stretched between them, pure tension, pure gravity. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely steady. "Very well," she said. 3 days, you will accompany me through every duty and every private hour I permit. You will observe, you will write, and at the end you will answer my question with absolute honesty." Callan bowed slightly. "I promise." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer of her breath in the starlight haze. "If you lie," she said softly, "I will know." "I don't doubt it." Her eyes held his for another moment, piercing, desperate, unreadably ancient, before she turned away, ascending back into the half-shadowed throne. "Dawn," she said. "Council chamber, your observation begins then." Callan left the hall with the distinct sensation that he had stepped into something far more dangerous, far more intimate, and far more important than diplomacy. Behind him, Erinya remained seated in the dim light, staring at her own reflection cast faintly in the metallic walls. For the first time in centuries, she didn't recognize the expression she saw. Anticipation, fear, hope, possibility, and something else she had no name for yet. Something that might, under the right light, become beautiful. Dawn in Ver Talorian didn't break so much as bloom. Light rose from the ground instead of falling from the sky, diffusing through crystalline walkways and casting soft gold through the council chamber's high arches. Callan arrived precisely at the agreed time, journal in hand, trying not to appear too aware of the royal guards watching him with quiet suspicion. Erinya entered moments later, but not in the regal cascade of ceremonial robes he'd seen the night before. She wore something simpler, if anything woven from starlace and pale metallic threads could be called simple. Her crown was smaller, less imposing, and without its full weight she looked different. Still formidable, but more human in posture, more grounded. The advisors lining the curved council table bowed as she approached. Their eyes flicked to Callan, questioning his presence, but none dared speak. "Proceed," Erinya commanded. And so they did. For hours, Callan watched her work, watched the shift from stillness to razor-sharp attention. A mining guild requested extensions. A trade envoy argued over tariffs. A planetary senator attempted to hide data manipulation within a polished speech. Erinya dismantled him with a single, devastating question. "What are you avoiding?" The senator froze, then crumbled. Callan wrote quickly, trying to capture everything. Precision without cruelty. Authority without performance. Justice delivered without spectacle. Between proceedings, Erinya gestured him into a private antechamber. Only then did she breathe, not relaxed, but unguarded enough that tension seeped from her shoulders. "Well," she asked without turning. "You expected applause," Callan said, "but what you want is correctness." She turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "Don't presume to psychoanalyze me. You asked me to observe." Erinya studied him, trying to determine whether she should be irritated or impressed. She seemed to settle on something between. "That senator you dismantled," Callan continued. "You knew his deception before he spoke." "Not deception," she corrected, "fear." She moved closer, her voice lowering as if discussing something intimate rather than political. People who mislead often fear consequences more than they crave advantage. When confronted, they crumble not because they are caught, but because they are relieved. "That's unexpectedly compassionate." She scoffed softly. "Compassion has nothing to do with it. I simply prefer truth, even when truth is inconvenient." Callan made another note. Truth matters to her more than power. He didn't expect her to notice, but she did. "What did you write just now?" She asked, an observation. "Read it." He hesitated, then obeyed. "Truth matters to you more than power." Erinya's expression shifted, unreadable and sharp. "Truth is power, ambassador, the only kind that sustains." But Callan had seen the flicker of something behind her words, pain or memory or both. As the day progressed, he watched patterns emerge. She listened more than she spoke. She demanded evidence before accepting conclusions. But the most striking observation came unexpectedly during a minor territorial dispute. An elderly woman, skin-lined, posture bent, approached with a complaint about ration distribution in the outer districts. Nervous, trembling, her voice barely carrying across the hall. Erinya descended the dais to meet her on equal ground. "Speak," she said gently, not kindly gently, a distinction Callan found stunning. The woman poured out her worries, voice breaking. And the queen, this towering, elegant force of law and legacy, listened with full, undivided attention, as if the old woman's fears mattered more than the Senate's demands. When Erinya made her ruling, it was decisive and fair and merciful in equal measure. The old woman wept with gratitude. Erinya's jaw tightened, her hands curled. She looked away. Callan saw it then, not weakness, but the ache of someone who cared too deeply for her own good. Later in the antechamber again, she leaned her elbows on the table, head bowed for a moment, hair slipping over her shoulders. "You write too much," she muttered. "It's my job. It's unnerving. I could write less if you'd prefer." "No," she said abruptly. Then more softly, "No, keep writing." They moved to a balcony, overlooking the city between council sessions. Wind carried bioluminescent petals through the air, each drifting spark catching in Erinya's hair and dissolving like tiny falling stars. "You judge yourself harshly," Callan said quietly. "Not your decisions, yourself." She didn't look at him. Ruling requires two constants, unwavering certainty and the willingness to doubt everything. "That sounds contradictory." "It is, a breath thin and tired. Most days I'm both. He wrote again, and this time she tried to catch the words by leaning closer, reading upside down. You wrote, she breaks in private so others don't have to. Yes, that is inaccurate. Is it? Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and searching. He held her gaze. This time she looked away first, breath catching and released as if controlling something precarious. Day one is complete, she said, retreating into formality too quickly. Tomorrow you will follow me beyond the court. Where? The gardens, and the places I go when diplomacy fails and duty grows heavy. Callan closed his journal. I look forward to it. Erinya's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the faintest softening of the unbreakable lines that shaped her face. Do not romanticize what you'll see, Ambassador. I don't intend to. Good, she whispered, almost too quietly to hear, because I've never been beautiful in the places I'm taking you next. Callan did not respond, not with words. He only opened his journal and wrote a single sentence. Places reveal people, and sometimes people reveal beauty where none believe it exists. The next morning, Callan found the palace gardens waiting like a hidden world carved out of serenity. They stretched for kilometers, spiraling into terraces of alien flora that pulsed with faint light or rippled when brushed by wind. The air smelled faintly of silvermint, a scent he'd only encountered on Vertalorian. Erinya did not wear robes today. Instead, she wore something close-fitting and utilitarian, a garment that revealed the subtle metallic sheen of her skin and the faint bioluminescent markings along her arms, markings that shifted when she moved. She looked less like a queen and more like a scholar or traveler. Follow me, she said, her voice calm but distant. Callan walked beside her through towering crystalline vines that curled toward the sun mirrors above. Every step revealed new shapes, flowers that hummed softly, grass that refracted light like liquid glass, trees whose leaves folded like wings. You maintain all this? Callan asked. I tend what requires tending, the rest adapts. She paused beside a cluster of shimmering plants whose petals flickered in response to proximity. This one should not even exist on this world. Too fragile, too climate-dependent. She touched a petal with breathtaking gentleness. But things survive when someone believes they can. Callan wrote quickly, unseen softness, hidden choices of care. You're writing again, she noted without looking. Yes. What did you write? That you believe things survive when someone tends to them. She inhaled sharply, as if the words pressed too close to something personal. You assume too much. I observe what you show. She said nothing, continuing deeper into the gardens until they reached a small pavilion constructed of shifting light and pale metal. On the table inside lay dozens of hand-drawn botanical sketches. You draw, Callan said, surprised. Did you expect me to merely sit on a throne for 3 centuries? No, he admitted, stepping closer to examine the sketches. They were meticulous, every vein, every gradient of bioluminescence captured with near-scientific precision. You're talented. Talent is irrelevant. This is memory. When I cannot fix worlds, I can at least preserve a flower. He turned to her. This is the first honest sentence you've given me. She stiffened. I have been entirely honest. No, you've been precise, consistent, controlled, but not honest, not until now. She opened her mouth to retort, then closed it again, eyes narrowing, not in anger but realization. Perhaps, she conceded quietly. For a while they walked in silence. Birds with crystalline wings darted overhead, and vines curled lazily around archways as if stretching in the morning warmth. Then Callan noticed something. Erinya avoided a certain area of the garden. She subtly steered their path away, her shoulders tightening whenever they approached the northern quadrant. What's there? He asked softly. Nothing relevant. That is the exact tone people use when something is very relevant. She stopped. Slowly, she turned her head toward the unspoken direction, jaw tightening. After a long breath, she walked toward it, not quickly, but with the reluctant gravity of someone moving toward an old wound. The path opened into a small clearing where a single plant grew, strange, elegant, and unmistakably dying. Its leaves drooped, their bioluminescent core dimming into muted ash blue. Erinya approached it with reverence. When she crouched beside it, her voice shifted, soft, fragile in a way Callan had never heard. I brought this from my home province, before the crown, before duty. She traced the wilted edges with her fingertips. It blooms only once every decade. A single luminous blossom, a symbol of renewal. Callan waited, sensing something deeper beneath the words. My mother tended this plant, Erinya whispered. She died before her next bloom. The realization struck him like a physical weight. You've kept it alive for centuries. No, a quiet, devastating correction. It has survived despite me. Plants do not respond well to absence. She bowed her head, shadows gathering along her cheeks, her markings dimming like fading constellations. For 3 centuries, she said, I've ruled millions, resolved conflicts, prevented wars. But I could not save a single plant my mother nurtured with her own hands. Callan knelt beside her. Its survival is because of you, even if you think otherwise. Do not offer comfort. Comfort softens truth. Then truth, he said gently. You miss her. Erinya's breath broke, not loudly, but with the inward collapse of someone who had refused such acknowledgement for far too long. You're observant to the point of cruelty, she whispered. You asked for honesty. She didn't argue. The plant's last leaf broke off under her fingers. Erinya caught it before it fell and held it as one might hold something sacred. Every time it dims, she said, I am reminded that I am not enough. Callan shook his head. Or you're reminded you're not unbreakable. She looked at him then, fully looked. Something raw and defenseless flickered across her expression, like a star collapsing inward. No one speaks to me this way, she murmured. Maybe that's the problem. Silence settled between them, heavy but no longer cold. Slowly, deliberately, Erinya stood and let the dead leaf float down onto the soil. There is more for you to see, she said finally. Her voice was steady again, but softer, as if something essential had shifted. Come. She led him out of the gardens, down a series of steps carved into obsidian stone. As they walked, Callan wrote, pain where she hides it, grace where she denies it, beauty where she thinks none exists. She didn't ask him to read it this time. She didn't need to. Where they arrived next stole his breath, the medical wing. Larger than he expected, brighter, filled with soldiers and civilians recovering from conflicts he only knew about in briefings. Erinya moved among the beds with purpose but not regal distance. She knew names, injuries, families, hopes. Fears. She sat with a young officer trembling from trauma, held her hand, whispered something that made the officer finally breathe again. And there, Callan saw her collapse happen, not in her posture but behind her eyes. Every wound she witnessed, she carried. Every cry she absorbed. Every grateful smile cut her in ways she refused to show. When they finally stepped out into the corridor, Erinya exhaled sharply and leaned against the wall. For a brief moment, she let the facade slip entirely. You're writing again, she said, voice thin. Yes. What did you write this time? He didn't hide the page. He let her read. She cares too much, and she believes that makes her weak. It doesn't. It makes her extraordinary. Erinya closed her eyes. When she opened them, they glimmered with unshed tears she refused to let fall. Tomorrow, she whispered, you will see the part of me I hide even from myself. Callan's voice softened. And the day after, I will answer your question. She nodded, but neither of them moved, as if the air between them held something fragile neither dared disturb. A storm rolled over Ver Talorian the next day, not a storm of rain, but of shimmering iron light that rippled across the sky like fractured auroras. The palace halls dimmed as the atmospheric shields adjusted, and Callan followed Erinya through corridors he'd never been allowed to enter before. Guards watched with tight jaws but remained silent. Whatever she had told them, it granted him passage even here. Where are we going? He asked quietly. To the place where the crown breaks me, she replied without turning. The part of my life no courtier or senator walks willingly. They descended deeper into the palace, past administrative chambers, past archives humming with holographic records, until they reached a heavy door of dark alloy. Erinya paused before it, her hand hovering over the biometric panel. This wing, she said, was built by my predecessor, a place rulers come to when they must face consequences too great for public eyes. She entered her passcode. The door slid open. The room beyond was unexpectedly small, quiet, intimate, a long table, a panoramic display of the outer provinces, and 3 advisors sitting in tense silence. Erinya's voice dropped into a tone Callan had not yet heard. This was the voice of a leader forced to say what she despised. Begin the briefing. The eldest advisor stood, projecting a map. Red indicators flared across distant sectors. The famine in the eastern colonies worsens. Relief ships are delayed due to raids. Casualties are rising. The Senate demands redistribution of supplies. Erinya's jaw tightened. Redistribution requires stripping other colonies of reserves. If we do nothing, the advisor continued, they will starve. Erinya said nothing for several seconds. But Callan saw the change, the fading of her markings, the way her breath shortened. Decision by decision, something inside her eroded. "Authorize emergency transfer," she said at last. "I'll speak to the Western governors personally." "And this," another advisor said, switching displays. Images now showed a border conflict along a mining world. "The Veil insurgents grow bold. They want sovereignty. The Senate demands we put it down." "And what do you recommend?" she asked. "Their claims have merit, Majesty, but granting autonomy weakens central authority." Erinya turned away from the screen. "So choosing justice destabilizes politics, and choosing stability creates oppression." She exhaled, rubbing her forehead as though pushing back a migraine. "Show me casualty estimations if we intervene militarily." Numbers appeared. They were not small. Callan felt tension gather in the room like charged air. Erinya stared at the projections for a painfully long time. Her shoulders slumped, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that Callan saw the fracture. "Withdraw troops," she said quietly. The advisors stiffened. "Majesty, that will be seen as weakness." "They are not rebels," she cut sharply. "They are people who want what every species wants, sovereignty over their own soil." She braced her hands on the table. "I will not slaughter citizens begging to breathe." Silence, no advisor dared argue. But Callan saw the moment she paid for that choice. The moment fear settled across her features, subtle but unmistakable. The Senate would retaliate politically. Her authority would be challenged. Another burden added to the mountain she carried alone. When the briefing finally ended, the advisors bowed and left, but Erinya didn't move. She remained standing before the table, hands flat, head lowered, breathing slow and careful as if trying not to break. "This is the place you hide from yourself?" Callan asked softly. She didn't look at him. "This is where I choose the kind of queen I will be, and every choice costs something no one ever sees. You don't have to carry that alone." "Of course I do." Her voice sharpened. "That is what a crown is." Callan stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Why did you bring me here?" She lifted her head. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with exhaustion so deep it bordered on sorrow. "Because you asked to see who I am when I don't perform." She gestured to the dimmed chamber. "This is me, not the throne room, not the gardens, this impossible place of unsolvable choices." "Then why do you think that makes you unworthy of beauty?" Her expression cracked just for a heartbeat. "Because none of this is soft," she whispered. "None of this is gentle. Beauty feels like something untouched by brutality." "And she laughed, a quiet, painful sound. "I am made of brutality softened only by obligation." Callan shook his head. "No, you're made of conscience. That's infinitely rarer." She turned sharply. "Conscience has cost me more than any enemy." "Then let me be clear," he said gently. "The way you hurt over your decisions, that is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of humanity." She closed her eyes. "I'm not human." "Then whatever your equivalent is, your capacity to feel what others ignore, that is not a weakness. It's the truest strength I've ever seen." Erinya drew a trembling breath. "You speak as if you admire me." "I do." She opened her eyes. Her gaze was unguarded, aching, searching, ancient in its fatigue and young in its vulnerability. "You still haven't seen the worst," she whispered. She turned and gestured for him to follow, through another door, down another corridor, into a small, dim chamber carved of pale stone. Erinya stepped inside. Callan followed slowly. The room held a single object, a memorial shard, a crystal obelisk engraved with names, thousands of them, each representing someone who had died under her reign. Casualties of disease, famine, accidents, border conflicts, political decisions, natural disasters. Every name glowed faintly in the dimness. Erinya touched the stone with trembling fingers. "I come here when I need to remember the cost of every ruling, every failure, every life I could not save." Callan's throat tightened. He spoke carefully. "No ruler could save them all. But I am not most rulers." She pressed her forehead against the crystal. "I was raised to believe perfection was required, that mistakes were unacceptable, that compassion must never cloud judgment, but judgment must never violate compassion. That's impossible." "I know," her voice cracked. "And yet I try, and every time I fail I come here, and I read their names, and I—" The breath she drew tore through her. "And I beg forgiveness from people who can no longer give it." Callan stepped closer. Slowly, carefully, he didn't touch her. He let his presence be enough. "Erinya," he whispered, "this is not the worst of you." She turned her head slightly, eyes wet. No, this is the best of you." The part that refuses to forget the cost of power. The part that remembers every name. He swallowed. The part that hurts, that's the part most deserving of beauty. Erinya stared at him, as if searching for a place to anchor her breaking composure. "Your cruel ambassador," she whispered. "You make truth sound like comfort. And you," he said softly, "make strength look like heartbreak." Their eyes held. Something fragile bloomed in the silence, something neither dared name. Erinya spoke first. Barely audible, "Tomorrow is the final day. I know. You will see what remains when the crown is removed. I'll be there." She hesitated, then turned away as if escape were her only protection. But Callan's rain, real rain this time, fell over Ver Talorian on the morning of the final day. Not the iron storms of the previous cycle, not mist or engineered weather, but heavy, cleansing rain that hammered against the palace skylights and blurred the horizon into silver. Callan arrived at Erinya's private chamber precisely at dawn. But when the doors opened, the queen did not greet him. Erinya stood with her back to him, facing a tall mirror carved into the crystalline wall. Her ceremonial crown lay discarded on a table beside her, its absence revealing the faint, luminous markings that ran along her temples. She wore no armor, no regalia, no projection of authority, only a dark robe tied loosely at the waist. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked like a person instead of a symbol. "You're early," she said without turning. "I thought you would want the day to begin soon. That depends on what this day must become." The tone in her voice, quiet, raw, made him step closer. "Erinya," he said gently, "you asked me to see you without the crown, to witness who you are underneath. That's all today needs to be." "No," she whispered. "Today, you tell me whether beauty is something I am permitted to possess." Her reflection stared back at her in the mirror. Sharp features, luminous eyes. A face sculpted by millennia of selective evolution and centuries of political discipline. And yet, beneath all of it, she looked profoundly uncertain. "3 days," she murmured. 3 days of letting you observe the parts of me I have never allowed anyone to witness. And now I find myself fearing an answer I once believed could not touch me." Callan stepped beside her, not too close, just near enough that she could feel his presence. "Show me," he said softly, "what you believe is left when the crown is gone." Erinya inhaled slowly, then turned away from the mirror. "This way." She led him through a side door, into a room dimly lit by strips of soft violet biolight. A long, low table was covered in scrolls, handwritten notes, sketches, half-finished reflections, not official reports, not decrees, journal entries. "This is the part of me no one sees," she said quietly. "The part with doubts. The part with exhaustion. The part that questions her own worth." Callan approached the table slowly. He didn't touch anything, he simply looked. One page caught his eye. Erinya saw and flinched. He read the words aloud, voice steady. "If power isolates, does compassion doom me entirely? If I love my people, must I sacrifice myself to serve? If I remain unbroken, do I become something unfeeling? If I break, who will be left to rule?" Erinya turned away sharply. "I should not have shown you this." "You wanted honesty," Callan said, "and this is honesty in its purest form. It is weakness. It is humanity. I am not human." "Then it is whatever your species calls the part of a person capable of loving the world enough to wonder if she deserves love in return." Her breath trembled. "You twist my words into comfort again," she whispered. "No," Callan said. "I reveal what your words truly mean." Silence stretched long, fragile, trembling with unspoken things. "Come with me," she said suddenly, voice tight. She led him deeper into the chamber, through another doorway, into a small sanctuary lit by flickering wings of bioluminescent insects. There was a single chair in the center and shelves lined with objects, pieces of her childhood, reminders of the life she'd had before the crown. A small carved figurine, a cracked musical crystal, a pressed flower sealed in glass, its colors long faded. "My mother gave me this room," Erinya said. "She told me rulers must keep a place where they can remember who they were before power." "Do you come here often?" Callan asked. "No." Her voice thinned, "Because remembering hurts." Callan approached the pressed flower. This was hers. Erinya nodded. "It was the first plant I ever cared for. I kept it alive for 27 years. Then," she swallowed, "then I became queen." "And you lost the part of yourself that nurtured it." "Yes." He turned to her. "Bring it back." She blinked. "What?" "Bring that part back, the part that tends, the part that loves simply because loving is what you do." Anger flickered in her eyes. "You assume it is possible. You survived 3 centuries without losing it entirely. Barely, barely is enough, Callan whispered. Erinya looked at him then as if seeing him for the first time, her breath caught. Her skin markings brightened faintly with the emotional pulse her species couldn't hide. You speak as if you know me. I've spent 3 days learning you. That is not enough. It is enough to know this. You are more than what you fear you've become. Her lips parted, then closed as if she didn't trust her voice. So, she said carefully, you believe beauty comes from these pieces of me. No, Callan said, not from the pieces, from the whole. From the ruler and the woman and the child who pressed flowers and the queen who carries the names of the dead. From the strength and the doubt. From the sorrow and the hope. Beauty isn't something you earn. It is something revealed when someone finally sees you. Erinya stared at him, every wall, every shield, every practiced barrier trembling. You see me? She whispered. Yes, all of you. And what do you see? Gunfire could not have made him hesitate less. Someone extraordinary. Her breath broke. Callan, do not say words you cannot take back. I don't want to take them back. Silence, unmoving, electric. Rain thundered outside, muffled through crystal walls. The biolights hummed faintly. For a moment, the entire palace seemed to hold its breath. Then Erinya stepped forward slowly like a creature afraid of its own instinct. Her hand lifted. Stopped inches from his face, trembled. I have not allowed myself to want anything, she whispered, in longer than your world has been at peace. You're allowed to want. And if what I want is forbidden, then it has never stopped you before. Her composure shattered, not with tears, but with the sheer force of longing she could no longer suppress. She touched his cheek, brief and trembling, then pulled back as if she'd burned herself. I don't know how to do this, she said. How to be weak and strong at once. You're not weak, Callan whispered. You're brave. She flinched as if the word struck something deep. He stepped forward, not touching her, just close enough that she could choose. Erinya closed her eyes, drew a long, unsteady breath, and chose. She leaned in, barely, carefully. Her forehead rested against his, the smallest, most fragile gesture of trust a queen had ever given anyone. This, she whispered, is all I can manage. It's enough. For a long moment neither moved, neither spoke, neither breathed without feeling the other breathe too. Then she drew back, not far, just enough to look at him. Tomorrow, she said, dawn arrived quietly on the final day, not with storms, not with silver rain, but with a stillness that felt deliberate. The palace hummed with its usual morning energy, but inside Erinya's private chambers, everything was silent. Callan stood near the center of the room, journal closed, hands clasped behind his back. He'd barely slept. He doubted she had either. Erinya emerged from her inner chamber wearing neither ceremonial robes nor utilitarian attire. Instead, she wore something simple, soft fabric unadorned, something only a woman, not a queen, would choose. Without the crown, her markings glowed faintly with the soft rhythm of her pulse. For a moment, she simply looked at him. No guards. No audience, no throne, just two people standing at the edge of something neither had words for yet. Are you ready? She asked. I've been ready since the first night. She exhaled, tension rippling briefly through her posture. Then speak. Callan shook his head gently. Not here, not in a room where reflections distort meaning. Her brow lifted, but she didn't argue. He led her through the palace hallways, past the quiet morning guards, past the gardens already waking with soft bioluminescent blooms, until they stepped into an open-air balcony high above the city. The sunrise over Talorian was breathtaking, veins of gold and violet splitting across the horizon, casting light that painted the towers below with impossible color. The wind brushed past them, cool and clean, lifting the edges of her hair. Erinya clasped her hands behind her back, the way she did when bracing for impact. Now, she said, tell me. Callan turned to her fully. You asked if someone like you could ever be considered beautiful by human standards. I did, and I told you I could not answer on appearance alone. She swallowed, and now I've seen you, all of you. Something flickered in her markings, fear, hope, or both. Callan stepped closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough that she could feel the intent behind his words. Beauty, he said softly, isn't something you wear. It isn't something you inherit. It's not in symmetry, not in power, not in flawless posture or perfect control. Erinya's lips parted, but no words came. Beauty lives in truth, Callan continued. In vulnerability, in courage. In the refusal to become numb, even when numbness would be easier. Her breath trembled. On the throne, he said, you are magnificent, powerful, commanding, but magnificence is not beauty. And in the gardens, he continued, When your hands touched a dying plant the way a daughter touches a mother's memory, that was beauty. A faint sound escaped her throat. And in the medical wing, when you held the hands of wounded soldiers and tried not to let them see how deeply you felt their pain, that was beauty. Her markings brightened, pulsing faintly with emotion she could not hide. And in that secret room filled with names carved into crystal, he said softly, when you believed yourself responsible for every life you couldn't save, that was beauty too. Not because you broke, he whispered, but because you broke for them. Erinya's eyes closed just for a moment against the weight of the words. You think my suffering is beautiful? She asked, voice trembling. No. Callan stepped closer slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. I think your humanity, your equivalent of it, is beautiful. The part of you that still cares, still hopes, still chooses compassion even when politics punishes you for it. Silence hung between them, filled by wind and the hum of the city below. Finally, Erinya's voice emerged, barely audible. Then tell me plainly, Callan Ward. He met her eyes, unflinching, certain. You are beautiful. Her composure shattered, not in a dramatic outburst, but in a soft, devastating collapse of breath. She turned away, one hand gripping the balcony rail as if steadying herself against something too large and too unexpected. Callan waited. He didn't move, he didn't fill the silence, he let her feel it. Erinya's voice eventually broke the air again, quieter than the breeze. No one has ever said that word to me without fear or agenda. She took a trembling breath. 3 centuries and not once. Callan stepped near enough that his presence warmed her shoulder, but he still didn't touch her. You deserve to hear it, he said. Not as flattery, not as diplomacy, as truth. She turned toward him slowly. Her eyes glistened, not with tears alone, but with a kind of terrified hope. I don't know what to do with this, she whispered. You don't have to do anything. That's impossible. He smiled softly. Then do just one thing. What? Let yourself believe it, even for a moment. Erinya shook her head. Belief is dangerous. So is honesty, he said, and yet here we are. Something in her face loosened, melted, softened in ways he had not seen even in her most vulnerable moments. She took one step toward him, careful, deliberate, trembling. Callan, she whispered, voice cracking. If I allow myself to believe you even for a moment, I don't know who I will become. He answered gently, someone who has nothing left to hide. The wind shifted, her markings brightened, her breath hitched, and then very slowly, as if defying every instinct she'd built over centuries, Erinya lifted a hand and touched his cheek. Light pulses flashed faintly along her skin where her fingers met his. He closed his eyes at the contact. She didn't kiss him immediately. She leaned her forehead against his, her hand still on his cheek, her breath unsteady. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. He lifted his hand, careful as a prayer, and rested it against hers. Thank you, he whispered back, for letting me. Only then did she close the distance between them. It wasn't a desperate kiss like the ones born of fear or grief. It wasn't frantic or clinging. It was slow, deliberate, reverent, 2 people meeting without titles, without armor, without expectation. A kiss shaped not by urgency, but by recognition. When they finally parted, breath warming the narrow space between their faces, Erinya spoke first. What now? Callan smiled softly. Whatever you choose. She looked at him, really looked, and this time her smile appeared, a small, trembling, utterly unguarded thing. Then stay, she whispered, not as an advisor, not as a diplomat, but as someone who sees me, and someone I am not afraid to be seen by. He nodded, I'm not going anywhere. Erinya exhaled, a long, shuddering breath of relief that seemed to lift centuries of weight off her shoulders. She leaned into him again, resting her head against his chest, allowing herself, for the first time, to simply be held. Below them, Vert Talorian glowed.
Oui, elle est jolie, guys. Pour vrai, c'est une très belle femme. Si vous aimez les grandes queens, total yes, guys.
Yes.
Le soleil, je suis un vampire. Tabarnouche, il y a du vent à souhait. Oh, souvenir!
Ouh!
Souvenir! Ouh! Magasin de souvenirs. Il y a du monde. C'est un magasin populaire. C'était-tu lui?
C'est surtout très petit.
Oh shit, il est énormément petit. Je veux juste voir les... Oh, il y a des belles casquettes, là.
Il y a une casquette rose.
Non.
Mais c'est joli, le rose.
Ouais, mais le rose, les Canadiens sont pas roses.
C'est pas ça la question. I mean,
En vrai, il y a déjà plus de choix.
c'est vrai.
On est en mode collé serré, les gars.
I mean,
OK, mais c'est le prix qui va être rigolant.
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 Ah ouais,
44 boules. Moi, c'est elle que je trouve la plus belle, guys. Achète un chandail des sabres. Je pense pas qu'ils vendent un chandail des sabres ici. Mais ça m'aurait fait rire, guys, de faire la blague. Mais je pense pas qu'il va vendre un chandail des sabres dans un style de magasin où c'est genre juste du fucking canadien que tu vois là. You're crazy, là. Merci, Bobby le plombier, pour ton follow. En plus, j'ai même pas la bonne coiffure pour pouvoir essayer une casquette.
Ben, tu mets à peu près. Elle?
Mais c'est parce que moi, j'ai une petite tête. Ouais. Fais-moi essayer celle-là.
Si. Ah!
Es-tu capable de tenir le sac?
Ouais. Je pense que je suis une femme capable.
Femme capable.
Ouais.
Là, je sais que j'ai des lulus, là. Check, mets-le avant.
T'inquiète.
Pour toi.
Alright.
OK. Moi, j'ai une petite tête, puis les casquettes, ils me font bien, à part cette forme-là. Mais j'aime trop cette forme-là. Tu comprends? C'est comme,
Ouais.
j'accepte pas mon sort.
Mais moi, je pense qu'il y a toujours une manière de faire. Mais non, c'est cute.